You coming home would just embarrass the whole family, Elias. If you insist on showing up and ruining this for your sister, then don't bother calling me your father anymore." The words didn't just hurt, they echoed. They vibrated through the silent 40th floor office in downtown Seattle, clashing with the expensive hum of server racks and the rhythmic tapping of rain against the reinforced glass. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg. I just looked at the glowing green icon on my primary monitor, the digital heartbeat of the very house my father was currently standing in. And conceit, I leaned back in my leather chair, my eyes cold, tracking the pulsing light. "I understand perfectly, Arthur," I said, my voice as flat as a dead calm sea. I hung up before he could add another syllable of poison. "My name is Elias Miller. To the world of renewable energy, I'm the co-founder of a firm that's currently valued at 9 figures. I'm the man who holds the patents to the smart grid systems that keep entire neighborhoods running efficiently. But to my family back in that small, judgmental town, I was still the technician, the invisible kid who fixed the leaky faucets and crawled into the crawlspaces to patch the wiring while they sat upstairs and pretended I didn't exist." I looked down at my mahogany desk, where a small, handwritten invitation sat. It was for my mother's 30th wedding anniversary. I had spent 6 months designing a custom, off-grid water filtration system as a surprise gift for her system that would have saved them thousands. But according to Arthur, my presence would ruin the look for Sienna's new boyfriend, Victor. "Itai starred on the chin. Itai Tuesday. Indiniam one do. And defanavinces with a getted bitter. Victor, the visionary architect. Victor, the man with the proper job." A slow, bitter smile spread across my face. It wasn't a smile of sadness. It was the smile of a man who had finally found the exit door. I reached for my mouse. My hand was steady. No tremors, no hesitation. For 2 years, I had quietly authorized the automatic payments for their electricity, their high-speed internet, and their water. I had even installed my proprietary smart home core in their basement, disguised as a test unit just so I could ensure they were always comfortable. I was the silent engine keeping their life moving while they treated me like a broken spare part. Master account access. Elias Miller. Verification. Confirmed. If you minds different for, and it started design day B. I pulled up the billing dashboard. The total for the last 24 months blinked at me. $12,482.90. That was the price of my embarrassment. Embarrassment, that was the cost of a loyalty that was never returned. "If I'm an embarrassment," I whispered to the empty, rain-streaked office, "then you shouldn't have to rely on my charity." In quieter, with 2 deliberate clicks, I revoked the billing authorization. Then, I opened the system command console for the house. My finger hovered over the enter key. I wasn't just turning off the lights. I was activating limited guest mode. It would leave them with just enough power to realize something was wrong, but not enough to host a gala for a visionary architect. The green icon on my screen flickered, then turned a deep, warning amber. The tether was cut. The ghost in their machine was finally gone. The amber light on my monitor continued to pulse, a rhythmic reminder that the house 300 miles away was now operating on my terms. I didn't turn away. Instead, I opened a second window, my private banking ledger. I needed to see it. All of it. I needed the cold, hard data to kill the last lingering spark of guilt in my chest. I scrolled back, month by month, past the corporate investments and the payroll for my 60 employees, until I hit the category I had simply labeled home. It was a lie. It wasn't a home. It was a black hole. February. Electric bill, $412. Sienna had insisted on keeping the terrace heaters on 24/7 for her winter aesthetic photo shoots. I paid it. March. Water bill, $280. Elena had complained about the garden's dryness. I paid it. April. High-speed fiber internet, $150. Sienna needed it for her influence, she said. I paid it. It says, "Go out and not having dollar, dod, and fire dod, and our intentions God." In all they're nodded. As I scrolled, a pattern emerged, a digital trail of a family that only spoke to me when a credit card expired or a login failed. I recalled a phone call from 6 months ago. My mother, Elena, had used her fragile voice, the one she reserved for when the bank account was low. Elias, dear, the cost of living in this town is becoming unbearable for your father and me. We're so proud of your reading, the tour Dal, like Sid, Annuation 7. A little tech job. It must be nice to have a steady paycheck. She never asked how many hours I worked. She never asked if I was eating or sleeping. She just waited for the transaction successful notification to hit her inbox. They didn't love me. They loved the convenience of me. They loved the fact that I was the only bill they didn't have to worry about because I was the only child they didn't have to respect. I looked at the total once more. $12,482.90. That money could have funded a scholarship. It could have gone into my R&D department. Instead, it had bought me a front row seat to my own exclusion. I opened the smart home dashboard again. My family thought the system was a gift from a firm I worked for, a prototype they were testing. In reality, it was my masterpiece. It controlled everything from the HVAC to the smart lock on the front door. I didn't just stop the payments. I began to reconfigure the permissions. User, Sienna Miller. Status, restricted. User, Arthur Miller. Status, restricted. User, Elena Miller. Status, restricted. I set the thermostat to a permanent, unchangeable 65 degrees. I throttled the internet speed to a crawl, just enough to load a text email, but not enough to stream music or post a single aesthetic video. I disabled the automated landscape lighting and the heated floors. If I'm an embarrassment, I muttered, my voice echoing in the hollow office, then you can learn to live in the cold and the dark, just like you've left me for 30 years. I hit the final execute button. A prompt appeared on the screen. Confirm permanent revocation of master billing. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the key with a finality that felt like snapping a bone. The green light didn't just turn amber now. It went dark. Offline. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't the man behind their comfort. I was a stranger. And as the rain intensified outside my Seattle office, I felt a strange, terrifying sense of peace. The anniversary party was in 7 days. They had no idea that the foundation of their perfect life had just been pulled out from under them. I leaned back, letting the darkness of the office swallow me. The neon pulse of Seattle's skyline bled through the glass, casting long, crimson streaks across the wall like the shadows of memories I had tried for years to outrun. People often ask why I hide my success. Why a self-made millionaire allows his family to treat him like a struggling technician, a fixer of broken things. The answer lies in another party. 15 years ago, it was the day I graduated at the top of my class with a degree in electrical engineering. I stood on that stage, clutching a prestigious innovation award and a diploma that promised a future. But the batter alder in the Davrinine ban. I scanned the audience for 2 familiar faces. But the 2 seats reserved for my parents remained empty. When I got home late that night, there was no cake, no celebration. The house was buzzing, but not for me. Sienna had just been selected as a hand model for a local boutique magazine. "Oh, Elias, you're back?" My father, Arthur, had said, barely looking up as he poured champagne. "Put that paper in a drawer somewhere. Come toast your sister. This is the real pride of the family. The ticket that's going to put us on the map." My mother, Elena, didn't even turn around. She was too busy adjusting Sienna's dress, muttering about how studious children always turn out fine, but beautiful children need investment. In that moment, I learned a bitter truth. In this house, your value wasn't measured by your character or your effort. It was measured by how much prestige you could reflect back onto them. I didn't have Sienna's radiance. I didn't have the charm to flatter their egos. So, I became the ghost. I built my empire in total silence. When my first startup was acquired for $5 million, I picked up the phone to tell them. But then I heard Sienna in the background, crying because Dad wouldn't buy her a new car to keep up with her high society friends. Arthur's voice had come through the line. "Let me see if I can borrow from Elias's savings. The boy works hard and doesn't spend a dime on himself. It's not like he needs it for anything important." That was the day I decided. I would never tell them. I wanted to be loved for being Elias, not for being a walking ATM. I accepted the role of the handyman. I paid the bills, installed the filtration systems, and fixed the heaters under the guise of testing prototypes. I treated it as a rent-a-fee I paid to buy a tiny, flickering sense of belonging. I hoped that if I were useful enough, one day, they would finally see me. But Arthur's call today shattered the last of that delusion. They didn't just fail to see me. They viewed my very existence as an obstacle to their hollow vanity. I opened a hidden folder on my desktop titled Anniversary Project. Inside were the detailed schematics for a custom nanofiltration system I had spent 10 years perfecting. It was meant to be my gift to my mother. It wasn't just machinery. It was the sum of my life's work, wrapped in the last of my affection. I stared at the trash bin icon on the screen. Are you sure you want to permanently delete Anniversary Project? I clicked yes without a single tremor in my hand. 15 years of trying to earn a place at their table ended with a silent click. I was no longer the orphan in my own home. I was a man who understood that kindness without boundaries is just a slow suicide. The anniversary party is this Saturday. Sienna will have Victor. Arthur will have his high society facade. And Elena will have the luxury she craves. But they are about to learn that the luxury they flaunt is built on a foundation they just kicked away. The Miller residence was glowing, or at least, it was trying to. By tense, bauen station turted or an iklian, darted en. But they are about to learn that, situated in a neighborhood where appearances were the only currency that mattered, Arthur and Elena had spent the last week transforming their home into a stage. Sienna, make sure the smart lighting is set to golden hour by 6 p.m., Elena directed, her voice tight with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. And the climate control, it needs to be crisp. Victor's suit is wool, we can't have him sweating like a commoner. Sienna tapped impatiently at the wall-mounted tablet I had installed. She frowned. The system is being sluggish, Mom. I keep trying to override the settings, but it says restricted access. Elias probably messed something up the last time he was here poking around with his tests. Typical, Arthur grumbled from the hallway, adjusting a tie that cost more than he used to make in a week. The boy can't even leave a simple thermostat alone. Just leave it. It's cool enough for now. We have bigger things to worry about. Their focus shifted back to the front door. Victor was the prize. A rising star in the architectural world, Victor wasn't just Sienna's boyfriend. He was the family's golden ticket to a world they had only ever peered into through social media. When Victor finally arrived, he didn't fit the image Arthur had constructed in his head. He wasn't loud or boastful. He stepped into the house with a quiet, observant grace, carrying a bottle of vintage wine that Arthur grabbed with embarrassing eagerness. Beautiful home, Sienna, Victor said, his eyes scanning the ceiling. The integration of the smart grid is unusual for this zip code. And in den kan inzata hey, in 140 times sated, and then 40 times en quain. It looks like a high-end commercial install. Sienna beamed, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Oh, thank you, Victor. I basically directed the whole design. I wanted something that felt intuitive. You know, since I have such a feel for aesthetics. Intuitive is one word for it, Victor murmured, his gaze lingering on the recessed sensors. He looked impressed, but also puzzled. This is EM Systems hardware, isn't it? They don't usually do residential. The licensing alone costs a fortune. Arthur laughed, a hollow, booming sound. We have our ways, Victor. A family with our history. We make connections. Let's not talk shop. Let's talk about the future. As they moved toward the dining room, none of them noticed the small amber light on the wall-mounted tablet blink twice and then turn a flat, ominous red. In my office in Seattle, I watched the data stream. I saw the temperature in their house begin to climb. I saw the bandwidth for their internet begin to choke. They were parading around in a house held together by the brother they had just exiled. They were selling a life that wasn't theirs to a man who actually knew the value of the things they were lying about. The stage was set. The actors were in place. And I was about to pull the curtain. The dinner started with a forced elegance. Crystal glasses clinked under the soft glow of the recessed lighting, and the scent of expensive catering filled the room. But beneath the surface, the house was starting to groan. First it was the air. The crisp, cool atmosphere Elena had demanded began to thicken. The vents, once silent, started to hum with a strained, low frequency before shutting down entirely. Is it just me or is it getting a bit warm in here? Elena asked, dabbing her forehead with a silk napkin. Sienna glanced at the wall panel. I told you Elias messed with it. The screen is frozen on a guest accesses logo. I can't change a thing. Arthur waved a hand dismissively. It's just a glitch. Victor, tell us more about that new museum project in London. Truly visionary stuff. But Victor wasn't looking at Arthur. He was looking at the smart faucet in the wet bar, which had started to sputter. But, endos kamen. But mide fen for anytation daughter. But neen. Any tension, into spotter any tamen. Any tension daughter any tom. He watched as the clear water turned into a thin, sluggish trickle of gray before stopping completely. Then, the music, a curated playlist of smooth jazz, distorted into a jarring digital screech and died. What is happening? Sienna snapped, her poise beginning to crack as the sweat started to ruin her makeup. Suddenly, the house went dark. Not a total blackout, but the limited guest mode I had programmed kicked in. Every luxury light fixture died, replaced by a dim, sickly yellow emergency glow from the baseboards. The high-speed internet, the lifeblood of Sienna's social status, vanished. The power. Elena gasped. Arthur, do something. The guests will be here in 20 minutes. Arthur fumbled for his phone, his face red with rage. I'll kill him. I'll actually kill him. He's doing this on purpose because I told him the truth. No. Arthur. Elena hissed, grabbing her own phone. In quote, I hen sensation said off and the called Raudo and her letter. I hen sensation said, end quote, intention said off. He's just incompetent. He's a technician who can't even keep his own family's lights on. I'll handle this. He always listens to me. In Seattle, my phone buzzed on the desk. I let it ring for 10 seconds before picking up. I didn't say hello. I waited. Elias. My mother's voice was sharp, devoid of the fragile tone she had used for years. The house is falling apart. The lights are out, the water is off, and Victor is sitting right here in the dark. Fix it. Now, I don't care what kind of petty tantrum you're throwing because of what your father said. You have an obligation to this family. I looked at the rain outside my window, feeling a strange, cold clarity. An obligation? I repeated. Yes. I want to and use. I want it in family. We raised you. We gave you everything, she shouted, the sound of clinking silver in the background suggesting the party was collapsing into chaos. You owe us this much. Do your job and fix the system before you ruin your sister's life. That's the thing, Elena, I said, using her name for the first time. I did my job. I'm a technician, remember? And as a technician, I've realized the system is overloaded by people who don't belong in it. You wanted a proper look for your party. Well, this is it. The look of a house that isn't being subsidized by the son you're ashamed of. Elias, don't you dare. Goodbye, mother. Enjoy the darkness. Ente al, the cold and torn, queste anavidinus. I hear it's very aesthetic. I hung up. I didn't just block her. I put the phone in the drawer and locked it. For the first time in 30 years, the voices of their demands were replaced by the beautiful, silent rhythm of the Seattle rain. Inside the Miller residence, the atmosphere was suffocating. The emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows against the walls, making the expensive decor look like a cheap stage set. Arthur was pacing, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood, while Sienna tried to maintain a smile that looked more like a grimace. I am so sorry. Victor, Sienna pleaded, her voice trembling. My brother. He's always been unstable. He handles the maintenance for the house and clearly he's neglected it. It's embarrassing, really. Victor didn't respond immediately. He had stood up from the table and walked toward the main interface panel, the one Sienna had been tapping on earlier. He pulled a small, high-intensity flashlight from his pocket and flicked it on, inspecting the wiring behind the glass casing. Unstable? Victor asked, his voice low and thoughtful. Sienna, do you have any idea what you're looking at? A broken thermostat? She snapped, losing her grip on her persona. Victor shook his head, a strange look of realization crossing his face. No, this isn't a retail system. This is an integrated smart grid core. I've only seen this specific configuration once before, at the International Energy Summit in Zurich. He pointed the light at a microscopic engraving on the primary circuit board, visible only to someone who knew where to look. It was a stylized E. M. intertwined with a circuit pattern. Arthur, Victor said, turning around slowly. You said your son was a technician. What did you say his name was again? Elias, Arthur spat. Just a grease monkey with a hobby. Why? Victor's phone suddenly chirped in his pocket. He pulled it out, looking at a notification. His eyes went wide. That's impossible. He tapped a button, and the speakerphone filled the silent, dark room. Victor, a voice came through. It was calm, steady, and unmistakably the same voice that had just hung up on Elena minutes ago. Elias. Victor gasped. His voice filled with a reverence that made Arthur and Elena freeze. Sir, I'm at your parents' house. I had no idea. I've been trying to get a meeting with your firm for 6 months to license the EM smart grid patents for my new project. The silence that followed was so thick you could hear the rain hitting the roof. Victor, Elias's voice sounded over the phone, echoing in the dark kitchen. I didn't realize you were the visionary architect my father was so worried I would embarrass. I'm sorry you had to be caught in the middle of a family matter. But as you can see, the system has reached its limit of unauthorized users. Arthur stepped forward, his face pale, his mouth hanging open. Victor, what are you talking about? Who is on the phone? Victor looked at Arthur with a mixture of confusion and sudden, sharp disgust. Who? This is Elias Miller. Arthur, the man who holds the patents for 80% of the smart home technology currently being used in high-end architecture. He's the co-founder of EM Systems. He's not a technician, he's the man who built the industry. Sienna felt the room spin. The proper look she had tried so hard to cultivate was shattering. The grease monkey was the man her visionary boyfriend looked up to as a god. Elias? Sienna whispered toward the phone, her voice cracking. Is that really you? It's me. Sienna, Elias replied. But like Dad said, I'm just a technician. And tonight, I've decided I'm officially off duty. Enjoy the party. The line went dead. The silence in the room was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a physical weight, pressing the air out of Arthur's lungs. He stared at the darkened phone in Victor's hand, as if it were a weapon that had just discharged. Victor didn't put the phone away. He looked at the family around him, the elegant dresses, the expensive wine, the polished furniture, and for the first time, he saw the cracks in the lacquer. He saw the desperation in Arthur's eyes and the shallow vanity on Sienna's tear-streaked face. So, Victor said, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut. The embarrassment you were so afraid of was the man who actually owns the technology you're using to impress me. The man who literally keeps the lights on in this house. Victor, please. Sienna stepped forward, reaching for his arm. It's not like that. Elias. He's always been difficult. He never told us. How were we supposed to know he was? That he was him? Victor pulled his arm back, a look of genuine disbelief on his face. How were you supposed to know? He's your brother. Sienna, you didn't need to know his net worth to treat him like a human being. You didn't need to see his patents to invite him to his own mother's anniversary. He looked at Arthur, who was opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. I came here because I thought I was meeting a family that shared my values. But I realize now that this house is just a hollow shell. Everything here, the comfort, the status, it's all stolen from a man you don't even have the decency to respect. Victor turned toward the door. The emergency lights cast his shadow long and imposing across the foyer. Victor, wait. Elena cried out from the shadows of the dining room. The party. The guests will be here any minute. We can fix this. We can call him back. The party is over. Elena. Victor said without looking back. Thanks. Then effed. Because Larfidio endum point anders. And as for your project, Sienna, don't bother calling my office. I don't build on foundations made of lies, and I certainly don't associate with people who treat their own blood like a broken appliance. The heavy oak door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the powerless house. Sienna collapsed onto the hallway bench, her face buried in her hands. The visionary future she had spent months orchestrating had vanished in a single phone call. Outside, the first of the invited guests began to pull into the driveway, their headlights sweeping across the dark windows of a house that had finally run out of borrowed light. Bevorting Minden, the Fording Mindeslade, and Howlated Fording 1. Outside, the first of the invited guests began to pull into the drive windows of a house that had finally run out of borrowed light. Arthur stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the cold and the dark. He looked at the wall panel where the M Systems logo glowed a faint, mocking red. He had told his son not to call him father. It was the only request Elias had finally obeyed. The peace of my Seattle office was short-lived. A week after the disastrous anniversary party, the receptionist intercom buzzed. "Mr. Miller, there is a couple here to see you. A Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Miller. They don't have an appointment, but they say it's a family emergency." I stared at the rain-streaked window. I had known this was coming. Greedy people don't go away when they are exposed. They simply change their strategy. I pressed the button. "Send them in." Bly. Part of video by vid. Arthur and Elena walked into my office, not with the arrogance they held in their own home, but with a practiced, humble gait. Elena was wearing her morning face eyes slightly red, a handkerchief clutched in her hand. Arthur looked smaller, his expensive suit now looking ill-fitting and tired. "Elias," Elena whispered, reaching out as if to touch my arm before pulling back. "Look at this place. We had no idea you were doing so well. Why didn't you tell us, dear? We could have celebrated your success together." "You were busy celebrating Sienna's success," I said, staying seated behind my desk. The mahogany barrier felt necessary. "What do you want, Arthur?" Arthur cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze by looking at the high-end art on the walls. "Son, we had a long talk. We realized we were wrong. That night at the party. It was a misunderstanding. We were just stressed. And Victor, well, he wasn't the right fit for our family anyway." The audacity was almost impressive. They were pretending the loss of Victor was their choice, not his. "We've been thinking," Elena added, leaning forward. "Now that we know how much you've achieved, it's clear that our old life in that house isn't sustainable. The bills, the maintenance, and with Sienna losing her partnership with Victor's firm, we're in a difficult spot. As your parents, we feel it's only fair that you share the fruits of your labor." "Share?" I asked. "A monthly stipend," Arthur cut in, his voice regaining some of its old authority. "Say, $2,000? It's a drop in the bucket for a man in an office like this. It would help us keep the house running and perhaps help Sienna start her own PR firm. It's the least you can do after leaving us in the dark during our biggest night." I looked at them, really looked at them. They hadn't come to Seattle to apologize. They had come to Seattle to negotiate a settlement for a bridge they had burned themselves. They didn't see a son, they saw a portfolio. $2,000 a month, I repeated, tapping a pen against the desk. "And in exchange, I get what? Your permission to call you father again?" "Elias, don't be cynical," Elena pleaded. "We're family. Family looks out for each other. Family doesn't charge admission for a seat at the table." "Elena," I said, standing up. "And they certainly don't wait until they see the bank balance to offer an apology." I opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I didn't hand it to them. I dropped it on the desk with a heavy thud. "Before we discuss your stipend," I said, "I think we need to discuss the truth about that house." Arthur reached for the manila envelope with a greedy glint in his eyes, likely expecting a check or a contract for their stipend. But as he pulled out the documents, the color drained from his face. Elena leaned in, her brow furrowing as she scanned the legal jargon. "What is this?" Arthur stammered. "Property tax records? Corporate titles? That house you've been living in for the last 5 years?" I said, my voice cold and surgical. "The one you were so afraid I would embarrass you in? You never owned it, Arthur." "Not really," Elena gasped, clutching her handkerchief. "What do you mean? We've lived there since Sienna was in high school. You had a subprime mortgage that was 3 months away from foreclosure 2 years ago," I explained, leaning over the desk. "I didn't just pay your utility bills. I bought the debt through one of my holding companies. I've been your landlord for 24 months. You've been living in my test site for free because I wanted you to have a home. I wanted to believe that if I removed the stress of survival, you'd have room for love. Arthur's hand trembled, the paper crinkling in his grip. You bought our house? You've been spying on us? I wasn't spying. I was supporting, I countered. But you made it very clear that my support was an embarrassment. You told me that if I showed up at that party, I shouldn't call you father. I took that to heart. And as of 8 a.m. this morning, the holding company has initiated a disposal of assets for that property. You're selling it? Elena shrieked, her voice reaching a frantic pitch. Where are we supposed to go? What about Sienna? She's devastated. Sienna is an adult. And you two are guests who have overstayed their welcome, I said. I stood up, walking around the desk to stand directly in front of them. The power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer the boy looking for a scrap of attention. I was the man deciding their future. You came here today to ask for $2,000 a month, I continued. You attached a price tag to your presence in my life. So, here is my counteroffer. I will not give you a cent. I will not reactivate the smart system, and I will not stop the sale of the house. Arthur slammed his fist on the mahogany desk, a desperate attempt to regain the authority he had held over me for 30 years. You can't do this. We are your parents. We gave you life. You gave me life, but you never gave me a place in it, I replied, my voice dropping to a whisper that filled the room. You raised a technician, Arthur. And as a technician, I found a fatal error in the family's logic. You think blood gives you the right to be cruel. I think respect is the only currency that matters. Since you're out of respect, you're officially bankrupt. I walked to the door and opened it wide. The hallway was bright, modern, and filled with the hum of a world that didn't need them. I've arranged for a car to take you back to the airport, I said. Your things will be packed and sent to a storage unit by the end of the week. Don't go back to the house. The locks have already been changed. Elena began to sob, but I felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, just a vast, quiet emptiness. Elias, please, she moaned. Don't, I said, cutting her off. You told me not to call you father, Arthur. I'm just returning the favor. From now on, we are strangers who happen to share a few memories. And frankly, most of mine aren't worth the cost of the electricity to keep them. They walked out, their footsteps echoing hollowly on the marble floor. They didn't look back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't watch them go, hoping they would. The office was quiet again. The heavy oak door had clicked shut, and with it, the noise of 3 decades of expectations had finally vanished. I walked back to the window. The rain in Seattle had slowed to a mist, and for the first time, the gray sky didn't feel oppressive. It felt like a clean slate. I looked at the mahogany desk. The envelope was gone, but the ghost of the family I thought I had was gone, too. I realized then that I hadn't been fixing their house for 2 years out of duty. I had been doing it out of a desperate, lingering hope that if I made their world perfect enough, they might finally find a place for me in it. But love isn't a technical problem. It's not something you can optimize with a smart grid or fix with a better filtration system. You can't wire loyalty into people who only see you as a means to an end. I reached out and closed the tabs on my monitor. The pulsing amber light of their house disappeared. The EM systems dashboard went dark. I wasn't a technician for them anymore. I was just Elias. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. I know some people will hear this and call me cold. They'll say that family is sacred, that you should forgive no matter the cost. But I've learned that there is a difference between a family and a blood tie. A family is a place where you are seen, even when you have nothing to offer. What I walked away from was a contract one where I gave everything and received only the permission to exist in the shadows. I'm moving on now. I have a company to lead, a life to build, and a heart that no longer beats for people who treated it like a spare part. But before I close this chapter, I have to ask you, was I wrong? Was it too much to change the locks and sell the foundation of their lies? Or was I finally just settling the bill for 30 years of neglect? I come and clue, and the lading, I would have clue first date exa. I think if you were in my position, would you have opened that door one last time, or would you have let the lights go out for good? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading them. Thanks for watching, and now, because sometimes The only way to find your own light is to stop paying for everyone else's. Thank you for staying until the very end. This is Heartflow. Take care of yourselves.